The funeral parlor fell into complete silence except for the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. My stepmother Diana's face went from triumphant to confused in the span of 3 seconds as she processed what I'd just said. My half-brothers Kevin and Tyler stopped their smirking immediately, their expressions shifting to something between panic and disbelief. "That's impossible," Diana said, her voice cracking slightly. "I have the will right here. Harold left everything to his real family." I opened my leather briefcase calmly and pulled out a thick folder of legal documents. The morning sun streaming through the funeral home's stained glass windows caught the gold-embossed letterhead of Morrison, Blackwell and Associates, the most prestigious estate planning firm in the city, and certainly not the discount legal service Diana had used. "This is the actual will," I said, my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the day. "Executed 3 years ago, properly witnessed and filed with the probate court. The document you're holding is from 2019. This supersedes it completely. My father Harold Bennett had died of a massive heart attack 5 days earlier at the age of 62. The funeral had been a tense affair from the moment I'd walked through the doors. Diana had made it clear that I wasn't welcome, despite being Harold's only biological child from his first marriage. She'd even seated me in the back row behind people I'd never met, while she and her sons occupied the front row like grieving royalty. The irony was that I'd been the one paying for his medical care for the past 2 years. Diana snatched the documents from my hands with shaking fingers, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the paper. Her face grew paler as she read, and I could see the exact moment she realized what she was looking at. Kevin and Tyler crowded behind her, reading over her shoulders. "This can't be legal," Kevin said, his voice rising. "Dad wouldn't have done this without telling us." "He did tell you," I replied. "He told you every time you demanded money from him. Every time you maxed out the credit cards he co-signed for you. Every time you moved back home because you couldn't pay your own rent." The truth was that my relationship with my father had been complicated for years. After my mother died when I was 16, he'd remarried Diana within 8 months. She came with 2 sons from her previous marriage, and suddenly I'd gone from being Harold's only child to being the outsider in my own family. Diana had made it clear from day one that she viewed me as competition for Harold's attention and resources. She'd convinced him to stop paying for my college tuition halfway through my sophomore year, claiming that her boys needed the money for their own education. I'd worked 3 jobs to finish my degree while Kevin and Tyler got full rides to mediocre state schools they eventually dropped out of. Sarah, my father's longtime attorney Margaret Collins, approached our small group. She was a woman in her 70s with steel gray hair and the kind of presence that made opposing lawyers nervous. "I'm sorry for your loss. Harold was a good man who made some difficult decisions in his final years." Diana spun around to face Margaret like a cornered animal. "This is all fake. Sarah forged these documents." Margaret raised an eyebrow with the kind of cool professionalism that came from 40 years of dealing with family drama. "Mrs. Bennett, I personally drafted these documents at Harold's request. He came to my office every month for 3 years to make adjustments and additions. He was very specific about his intentions." "But why?" Tyler asked, his voice breaking slightly. "Why would Dad cut us out completely?" I looked at my half-brothers, 25 and 27 years old respectively, both still living at home, both unable to hold down steady jobs for more than a few months at a time. Kevin had been arrested twice for DUI in the past year. Tyler had dropped out of 3 different colleges and currently spent his days playing video games in the basement. "He didn't cut you out because he didn't love you," I said quietly. "He cut you out because enabling you was killing him. Literally." The stress of supporting 3 adults who refused to support themselves had been taking a toll on Harold's health for years. Every phone call was about money, rent payments, car repairs, legal fees, credit card debt. He developed high blood pressure and insomnia from the constant financial pressure. Margaret opened her own briefcase and pulled out additional documents. Harold left detailed letters explaining his decisions. "Would you like me to read them?" "Yes," I said before Diana could object. Margaret put on her reading glasses and unfolded a handwritten letter. "This is addressed to Diana, Kevin, and Tyler, dated 18 months ago." She cleared her throat and began reading in Harold's familiar handwriting. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone, and you'll probably be angry about my final decisions regarding my estate. I want you to understand that this wasn't about punishment. It was about love. Real love sometimes means making hard choices. Diana, when we married, I thought I was gaining a family. Instead, I gained 3 additional dependents who never learned to stand on their own. I enabled this behavior and I take responsibility for that mistake. Sarah, on the other hand, has built a successful career in biotechnology and has been secretly helping pay my medical bills for 2 years without asking for anything in return. Kevin and Tyler, you are my stepsons and I love you, but I've done you no favors by constantly bailing you out of every bad decision. Sarah offered multiple times to help you both find jobs in her industry, to pay for career training, to help you build real futures. You laughed at her and called her a sellout for working in corporate America. Sarah has earned what I'm leaving her. You have not. The funeral parlor was so quiet I could hear Diana's labored breathing. Tyler was staring at the floor, while Kevin's face was flushed with anger and embarrassment. Margaret continued reading. The house on Maple Street, all bank accounts, the investment portfolio and my life insurance policy all go to Sarah. She understands the value of money because she's earned every dollar she's ever made. How much? Diana asked hoarsely. Margaret consulted another document. The estate is valued at approximately $2.8 million. The house is worth $800,000, the investment accounts total $1.4 million, and the life insurance policy is $600,000. The numbers hit Diana like physical blows. She'd been counting on that money to maintain her lifestyle, to continue supporting her unemployed sons, to avoid ever having to get a job herself. At 52, she'd never worked a day in her life, moving from her parents' support to her first husband's support to Harold's support seamlessly. This is ridiculous, Kevin said, his voice getting louder. Sarah doesn't need the money. She's got her fancy job and her downtown condo. We're the ones who need help. No, I said firmly. You're the ones who need to learn independence. There's a difference. The truth was that my fancy job had been built through years of grueling work. I'd started as a lab technician at Meridian Pharmaceuticals straight out of college, working 60-hour weeks while taking graduate courses at night. I'd earned my master's degree in biochemistry while working full-time, then spent 3 years developing new drug delivery systems that had generated over $400 million in revenue for the company. I was now the director of research development with a team of 30 scientists working under me. My current project involved developing targeted cancer therapies that could revolutionize treatment for pancreatic cancer, the same disease that had killed my mother. Sarah has been supporting herself since she was 18, Margaret continued, looking at another letter. Harold was very proud of her accomplishments. He wrote here, Sarah turned down 3 job offers from pharmaceutical giants to stay in the city and be close to me during my illness. She could be making twice her current salary in Boston or San Francisco, but she chose family loyalty over career advancement. That was something Diana and her sons had never known. I'd received offers from Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, and Genentech over the past 2 years. Each offer had included substantial signing bonuses and salary increases that would have set me up for life. But I turned them all down because Harold was sick and I wanted to be nearby. Diana had spent those same 2 years complaining that Harold wasn't giving her enough money for her weekly spa treatments and shopping trips. There's more, Margaret said, unfolding another document. Harold also left instructions regarding the family business. My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten about Bennett and Associates, the small accounting firm Harold had built over 30 years. It wasn't worth much, maybe $200,000 in assets, but it had been his pride and joy. The business goes to Sarah as well, Margaret read, with a note that says, Sarah understands the value of building something lasting. Perhaps she can turn it into something meaningful, or perhaps she'll sell it and use the money wisely. Either way, I trust her judgment. Kevin exploded. This is bullshit. We worked at that office. We helped Dad build that business. You worked there for 6 months, I said calmly. You embezzled $15,000 from client accounts and Dad had to quietly pay it back to avoid criminal charges. The color drained from Kevin's face. That particular family secret had been carefully hidden from Diana, who still believed Kevin had moved on to better opportunities when he'd left the accounting firm. Tyler tried a different approach. Sarah, come on. We're family. You can't just take everything and leave us with nothing. I'm not taking anything, I replied. Dad gave this to me because he trusted me to use it responsibly. And he was right to do so. The truth was, I didn't actually need Harold's money. My salary at Meridian was $240,000 annually, plus bonuses that often exceeded my base pay. I owned my downtown condo outright and had substantial savings and investments. But Harold's bequest wasn't really about the money. It was about vindication, recognition, and final proof that he'd understood who had truly been there for him. Margaret handed me another envelope. "This one is personal, just for you." I opened it with trembling fingers and found Harold's familiar handwriting. "Sarah, my dear daughter. If you're reading this, then I'm gone and you're probably dealing with Diana's dramatics. I'm sorry you have to handle this alone, but I know you're strong enough. I want you to know that I was prouder of you than I ever properly expressed. Watching you build your career, seeing you persevere through every obstacle Diana put in your path, knowing you sacrificed lucrative opportunities to stay near me during my illness. You became the person your mother and I always hoped you would be. Use this inheritance however you see fit. Invest it, donate it, buy yourself something nice, I don't care. You've earned the right to make those decisions. You've proven yourself 1,000 times over. I love you and I'm sorry it took me so long to show it properly. That I had to stop reading because my vision was blurring with tears. This letter was worth more than all the money combined. After years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, Harold had finally made it clear where I stood in his heart. Diana was staring at me with something approaching hatred. You manipulated him. You turned him against his own family." "No," Margaret interjected firmly. "Harold made these decisions over the course of 3 years, with extensive counseling from me about the implications. He changed his mind several times, always giving Diana and the boys more chances to prove themselves. Each time they disappointed him." "What kind of chances?" Tyler asked desperately. Margaret consulted her notes. "Harold offered to pay for vocational training for both of you. Plumbing, electrical work, HVAC certification, computer programming courses. You both refused, saying that kind of work was beneath you. He offered to help you start a small business if you could present a viable business plan. You never did. He offered to pay rent on apartments for both of you if you could hold steady jobs for 6 months. You both quit your jobs within weeks." I remembered those conversations. Harold had been so hopeful each time he'd presented these opportunities to Kevin and Tyler. He genuinely wanted them to succeed, to become independent, productive adults. Their casual dismissal of his help had broken his heart repeatedly. Sarah, on the other hand, Margaret continued, never asked Harold for anything. She paid her own way through graduate school, bought her own car, saved for her own home down payment. When Harold was diagnosed with heart disease, she immediately set up a trust fund to cover his medical expenses that weren't covered by insurance. Diana's face twisted with surprise. "What trust fund?" "The one that paid for Harold's cardiac catheterization, his medication, his dietary consultations, and his physical therapy," Margaret explained. Sarah contributed $85,000 to Harold's medical care over 2 years. She never told him where the money came from. She let him think his insurance was better than it actually was. This was news to Diana and her sons, who had never bothered to learn the details of Harold's medical situation. They'd known he was sick, but they'd assumed his insurance and retirement savings were covering everything. "Why didn't Dad tell us Sarah was helping?" Tyler asked quietly. "Because she asked him not to," Margaret replied. "She didn't want recognition or gratitude. She just wanted to make sure he got the best possible care." I looked at my half-brothers, both now staring at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Was it respect? Resentment? Probably all three. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a folder I'd prepared that morning. "Harold's will includes a provision for both of you, but it's conditional." Diana perked up immediately. "What kind of provision?" "He set aside $50,000 for each of you," I explained. "But you only get it if you complete a 2-year program, either college, trade school, or professional certification, and maintain steady employment for 1 full year after graduation." Kevin scoffed. $50,000? That's nothing compared to what you're getting." "It's a start," I said. "It's enough to change your lives if you actually commit to changing them." Tyler looked thoughtful for the first time all day. "What happens if we don't meet the conditions?" "The money goes to the American Cancer Society," Margaret answered. "Harold specified that organization because of your mother's death." That detail hit me right in the chest. Even in death, Harold was thinking about my mother, honoring her memory by fighting the disease that had taken her from us. Diana was studying the legal documents again, probably looking for loopholes or grounds to contest the will. This can't be legitimate. I'm going to fight this in court. That's your right, Margaret said coolly. But I should warn you that contesting this will could be expensive and ultimately futile. Harold documented his decision-making process extensively. He even had psychological evaluations done to prove he was of sound mind. The will is ironclad. I closed my briefcase and stood up, suddenly exhausted by the entire confrontation. Diana, if you want to waste money on lawyers, that's your choice. But the probate process is going to take months regardless. Maybe you should use that time to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. What's that supposed to mean? She snapped. It means you're 52 years old and you've never supported yourself, I said bluntly. Harold's gone. His insurance is gone. His income is gone. You need to learn how to take care of yourself. The reality was even harsher than I was stating. Diana had no job experience, no professional skills, and no savings of her own. She'd been living as a dependent her entire adult life, and now she was facing the prospect of actual independence for the first time. I could get a job, she said defensively. Doing what? I asked not unkindly. You need training, education, something marketable. The conditional inheritance applies to you too if you want it. Margaret nodded. Harold set aside an additional $30,000 for Diana if she completes a professional certification program and maintains employment for 1 year. Diana's pride warred with her practical need for money. I could see the internal struggle playing out across her face. Think about it, I said, gathering my things. All of you. Harold wanted you to succeed, but he wanted you to earn it. The opportunity is still there if you want to take it. I headed toward the funeral home exit, eager to escape the tension and process everything that had happened. Margaret walked with me, her heels clicking on the polished floor. Sarah, she said quietly, Harold would be proud of how you handled that. It can't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But it needed to be done. What will you do with the inheritance? I'd been thinking about that question for months, ever since Harold had first told me about his will changes. Some of it will go into a scholarship fund for students studying biochemistry. Some will go to cancer research. And I think I'll use the house as a group home for kids aging out of foster care. Margaret smiled. Harold would love that. He always said you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. As I walked to my car, I could hear Diana and her sons arguing loudly in the funeral parlor behind me. They were probably debating whether to contest the will, how to survive financially, and whose fault their current situation really was. I felt sorry for them genuinely. They'd had years to build relationships with Harold based on love and mutual respect rather than financial dependence. They'd had countless opportunities to develop skills, education, and independence. They'd chosen the easy path every time, and now they were facing the consequences of those choices. But I also felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Validation. Harold had seen through Diana's manipulation and his stepson's entitlement. He'd recognized who had truly cared for him, who had sacrificed for the family, who had built a life worth respecting. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my research team at Meridian. Final trial results are in. The new pancreatic cancer treatment is showing 85% effectiveness. We did it, Sarah. I smiled through my tears as I sat in my car outside the funeral home. Harold would never see the cancer treatment that might have saved my mother, but his support had helped make it possible. The inheritance would ensure that support continued, funding research and education for years to come. Inside the building, Diana was probably still raging about unfairness and betrayal. Kevin and Tyler were probably plotting ways to contest the will or manipulate me into sharing the money. But for the first time in years, I felt truly at peace with my family situation. Harold had made his choice and he'd chosen correctly. The people who had earned his trust would carry on his legacy. The people who had taken him for granted would finally learn what independence really meant. Some inheritances, I thought as I drove away, are about more than money. They're about recognition, validation, and the final settling of long-standing accounts. Harold had given me the greatest gift possible. The knowledge that he'd seen who I really was and he'd been proud.